Okay. I decided, for whatever reason, to record a little bit of the editing of the current version or current episode, I guess, of Wowcohol, just because I get asked a lot of questions from time to time about editing, and people make it seem like it's a really horrible, huge pain in the butt, and it really isn't. So I just wanted to. I'm doing this anyway, so I figured why not just do a little screen cap of it, and if you find it interesting, you do, and if you don't, you don't. So this is the editing of alcohol. Why alcohol? Sure. I haven't even been drinking alcohol. This is editing of Wowcohol, episode 21. The show was recorded in 3 parts, so there's part 1, part 2, and the interview. They're recorded out of order, but that's not important. That's not important for this. All 3 of them are going to be pre-processed in the exact same way. So I'm just going to show you one part, and then you'll kind of get the gist. I use a mix-minus system on the mixer, so all the Skype input comes in on one channel, all of me comes in on, and music and stuff like that comes in on another channel. And this is actually a split stereo track. So what I do first is I split it out into 2 different mono tracks. So now I can deal with each one of them separately. And the reason is because each one of them has their own kind of unique noise associated with it. So the first thing to do is to mute this track here and then find a sample of background noise. So this is a nice sample of background noise. And then what we do is we basically use that as a noise profile, and we don't do that. What the heck? And then we select that, and then we do a noise removal on this whole thing. It's really late, so if I seem punchy and a little bit out of sorts, that's because it's late, even for me, and that's saying something. All right, and then the second thing that we're going to do is we're just going to do that to the other track. So now we're going to mute this track and find us a little piece of noise here. Skype has weirder, different kind of noise. Kind of a hissy noise as opposed to kind of a rumbling noise. Anyway, it'll take care of it nonetheless. Just make sure that you are sampling the noise from the track that you want to remove that noise from. That makes sense, right? Sure it does. Just say yes. Just agree with me. Seriously, just agree with me. All right, so now that those 2 have their noise removed, we should have a fairly clean sound. I have a jet engine. Yeah, not a lot of background noise in there. Not that, I mean, by the time it gets compressed in this video, you won't notice it. Just take my word for it. It is. It is. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find where the show starts, which should be about right here. Hey, this is Daniel. Yeah, so that's the beginning of the show. So now I'm going to, all this little pre-chatter stuff, just going to delete that, get rid of it. So, hey, this is Daniel. And then I think we kind of ended. This segment ends into a cold start of the next segment, so I want to make sure that I don't have extra stuff here.
Will pop any moment.
That's right. Yeah. So right about there, take those 2 things and get rid of them. I have a cat in here assisting me. If I had a webcam, I'd show it to you. It's highly annoying. Okay, so this is our whole little thing here. So we've got the segment that we're going to use. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these tracks, and I'm going to use an effect called normalize. And what normalize is going to do is it's going to make the peaks of both of those tracks the same, which is just a stupid way of saying that it's going to approximate them being at the same volume to kind of compensate for one track being a little bit less or whatever. We will be using level later, so it's really just a stopgap thing. All right, so now I've got the 2 separate tracks, all like both mono, yada yada yada, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix them down into one track. So I'm going to mix and render them down into a single track that I can now deal with. And this track here, I'm going to export out. And when I export things out, I always do everything as a WAV file up until the very final cut of the show. So everything gets saved as a WAV file. Everything is uncompressed, full ugly audio. So this will be part 1 full. We'll save that out. And there you go. Exciting, isn't it? Now I'm going to do the same thing for part 2 and the interview. And so just keep in mind, everything that I'm showing you here will be done 3 times before we combine everything. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do to that at the moment in Audacity. So now what I'm going to do is, and this is important, I never save the changes of the master file. So that way I always have the master file to fall back on. Because why not? I just exported it as uncompressed audio. So it's the same thing. So I'm going to use this program called Levelator, which is a free program that comes from the Conversations Network. I think it's levelator.com. Anyway, let's see. Let's go find our file that we just did. So episode 21. So here's my part 1 full file here. I'm going to drag that episode, drop it on top of Levelator, and then I'm going to let it do its thing. And what Levelator does is it acts like a compressor limiter, but it does so after the fact. So anything that's soft will be brought up in volume, and anything that's really loud will be brought down in volume. And the goal is just to try to make it level, so that if you're in a noisy background environment, like listening in a car or just listening on speakers as opposed to headphones, it makes it much easier for people to listen. So that's the hidden magic behind all of the car-ready shows is Levelator. Now there is a filter inside of Audacity called Levelator or leveling. I'll look at it in a second, but it's not as good as Levelator. So for the most part, I always use Levelator. But I honestly haven't played around with the Audacity filter. So if somebody has had a lot of success with that, you can tell me, and that would be awesome. Levelator only deals with uncompressed audio, so that's another reason to save everything out as a WAV file. So there you go. That's now done, and basically what it does is it puts it in the exact same directory where we were, and it just it adds a prefix to the end of it. So where we had was part 1 full.wav. Now we have part 1 full output.wav. You can see here it's the exact same size. It hasn't taken anything away from the audio. All it's done is just made it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open back up this this levelated file. And you can see here it's fairly nice. If I were to import in the other one, the part full unlevelated one, see how it's got a little peaks and valleys here, especially like in this area here. And the levelated version has actually just made it nice and full. Anyway, so we'll get rid of that. So I'm dealing with the levelated file here. So now what I have is my actual thing that I'm working with, my actual segment that I'm working with. And there's a couple of things that I like to do. For instance, let me zoom in really tight here. The way that the show starts, we say, "Hey, this is Daniel."
And this is Jean.
And there's as you can see here, there's a huge gap between me saying that and her saying that, because we're on Skype, and there's just kind of inherent spaces in between where we talk. So Audacity is a really cool way to get rid of those spaces. It's called truncate silence. So what I'm going to go in and do is I'm going to take anything that's more than 150 milliseconds of silence, so a second and a half, and I'm going to compress that silence at a 4:1 ratio. And this is my threshold for the silence, so that just means I can play with that if I've got some background noise in the file, which I don't. And that's pretty much all it is to it. So I'm going to take out anything that's over a second and a half of a space and compress it down. So I'm just going to do this real quick, and it doesn't take very long at all. And now when you play it, you hear, "Hey, this is Daniel."
And this is Jean.
So it sounds a little bit more natural. The other thing that I do with all of my files is I speed them up just slightly, just kind of making it sound a little bit snappier, making us sound a little bit more quick-witted, which we're not. And for no reason other than it's just one of the Audacity stop points here, I always use 4.176%. So, and I'm changing the tempo here. I'm not changing the pitch, so it's just going to make the file a little bit faster. So you can see down here, the entire segment is 16 minutes and 34 seconds long. I'm now going to run this tempo thing on it, and that will make it a little bit faster. So there you go. So 15 minutes and 54 seconds. So now we have, hey, this is Daniel.
And this is Jean.
And welcome to Wowcohol. Seeing it, you really can't tell that it's sped up unless you knew that it was being done. Shh, don't tell anyone. So that is all the processing that I do to that file. So I'm now going to do that to part 2 and to the interview. And it's just kind of second nature, so it won't take that long. But I'm going to, I'll rejoin you when I add all of these pieces together.